today we are exploring the implications and impact of Nigeria First policy being introduced recently by the federal government. The federal government on Monday, May 5, announced a new policy known as Nigeria First, aimed at promoting local production and prioritizing domestic products in government procurement and contract. Mohammed Idris, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, said with this policy, Nigeria now comes first in all procurement processes, which entails that no foreign goods or devices that are already being produced locally will be procured without a clear and justifiable reason. Since this announcement of this policy, there have been reactions from key stakeholders within the economy, especially members of the organized private sector of Nigeria, who have welcomed the initiative, albeit cautiously. Well, to discuss the desirability and the expected implications of this new policy on the Nigerian economy, we're now being joined by Mr. Wale Smart Onyeride, is the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association, NECA. Of course, you're welcome to the show, Mr. Onyeride.
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning to you, sir. Let me start by asking you this morning, why does this policy why does it seem exciting to the organized private sector?
Thank you. You know, it's beyond the excitement that we feel as the organized private sector. I think the nation also, every critical stakeholder should be happy that there is a definitive pronouncement about this policy, because not because of itself, but because of the consequential effects, positive effects that we believe it will bring to us. It will surprise you that last year or 2 years ago, or in the last 24 months, the level of unsold stock that the manufacturers have to deal with was running to over ₦500 million. Over ₦1 billion unsold stocks. And the reason why you have that is because our propensity to patronize foreign goods, whether they are superior or not, our propensity to buy foreign goods is very high. And invariably, we are all contributing to the demise, the strangulation of local manufacturing. And as a country, we really cannot grow once where our propensity for export, for imports, continue to increase. So for us, putting a cap on it, make the Nigeria First policy, we help the local manufacturing, the local industries to actually grow and thrive. The more they grow, the higher our propensity to create jobs, the higher our propensity for government to make revenue, the lesser pressure we'll have on forex, because in 2023 alone, over $49 billion was expended on imports. And if you can conserve that pressure on forex, it also have some level of consequential effect on the value of the naira. So all in all, we believe it's a positive direction that we have canvassed for a long time. Now, beyond the positive nature of it, government need to go beyond the first policy and actually make production at the manufacturing and services level competitive. Because the fact is, if we say Nigeria first, and the unit price of every goods or service coming from Nigeria is higher than what an average person will get from overseas, the pressure will also be there to try and conserve cost and buy from where it's cheaper. So it's not only about the Naira First policy. The government must also look at what are the impediments to production. And until we address that, then this policy will be just a policy on paper.
And let's talk about the fact that this is not the first time that we've seen a policy pronouncement that was actually welcomed by the organization of private sectors and other stakeholders in the economy, but it turned into a failure due to a lack of commitment to implementation by the government. What do you think will make this one different from the previous ones?
itself will be the conscience of this policy. We will monitor it. The government has said ministries, department, agencies must not buy foreign products for substitutes. And for many of us in the private sector, we're already doing that. We've changed significantly from the 5 days suit and tie for most organization. Organization like ours, I've said, look, employees can wear statutorily, you can wear local fabrics, Nigerian fabrics, 2 or 3 times a week, so that the local textile industry can also grow. So if government can give life and show leadership at the ministry level, people can buy locally made products. You can wear Ankara to the office. We can also, the Ministry of Education can encourage the schools, instead of their uniform for secondary, primary schools can be, even nursery schools can be Ankara based. It's just this nationalistic verb that we need to make this work. Beyond government itself, I think all of us must play our very important role in making this economy grow. Without that concerted effort, without that commitment that we want it to grow, it will really not grow. But government must enforce at the MD level. Government must enforce at the presidency level. The National Assembly must be seen to support this policy in the context of the procurement, even from the National Assembly. And then it trickles down once we all realize that, look, the government have shown leadership. But we must not take this for granted. Because if you don't deal with the real issues that is affecting manufacturing of goods and products, which are regulatory issues, which are infrastructural issues, the unit price of every product, and which are even power. The Minister for Power said recently that cost of power will still go up, and those are the issues that feed into production. And you cannot like the FCCPC will try to do some time ago, trying to go to businesses, go to supermarkets, contending with the cost price, the selling price of goods and services. If you don't deal with the input cost, then you can't really achieve much. And with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, that is giving Africa some level of giving Africa itself some level of free entry and free exit, we will just also have to be careful, because products can come from within the African context, within the protocol of AFCFTA, within the protocol of ECOWAS. We can't really stop those products from coming. So the only thing we can do is to make the local production competitive in such a way that the price of a unit of a Nigerian product is less than the price of a unit of an imported product.
All right, Mr. Oyoride, I'm just going to bring in the Mr. Joshua Bassi, our editorial director here, to come into this conversation, and he has more questions for you. So over to you, Mr. Bassi.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, DG. You just talked about compliance, which is, like you said, if government does not do something to ensure that MDAs and agencies comply with this, then of course it will not really amount to anything. So I want to ask you, do you think there should be some compliance requirement and maybe penalties for MDAs who do not fall in line as far as this policy is concerned?
Of the president, I think there already a procedure for procurement that I think we are at the procurement, the Bureau of Public Procurement, if I get it right, as they mandated to monitor and also review the procurement standards for all the ministry, department, and agencies. But there should be a monitoring process, a monitoring organ to actually enforce these processes. For us in the private sector, there's no issues. We want Nigeria first. For our colleagues in organized labor, there is also, we believe there's no issues, because the more we patronize Nigeria, made in Nigeria, the more our capacity to create jobs, the more our capacity, our GDP will grow. So for us, there's no real issues. It's at that MDA level that government have to weighing the big stick. That if you flout it, then there will be consequences, very big consequences.
All right, and how should private employers adjust their procurement and sourcing strategies to actually align with the Nigeria First policy mandate?
For an average business, what he doesn't want to do is to go to the market either through the official market or the parallel market, quote and unquote, to go and spend money on dollars. Well, you can get that product here. It's adds to the cost of production. So an average business owner will rather source for raw materials here because it saves you from the pressure of sourcing for dollars. So it's when the input is practically unavailable that the average business owner will look for, okay, how do I source this input from outside? And because for every dollar that you buy, you are paying over 1,500. So it doesn't make business sense. So the average old business owner will rather source for inputs locally. And once those inputs are available locally, then it also reduces the pressure that we put on forex for our own general sake. So for the private sector, it's no brainer for us that look, we want Nigerians to patronize made in Nigerian products, but we need government, as I said earlier. It's a caveat, a very big caveat. If the cost of production is not less than the cost of importation, a rational buyer will just basically buy from rather buy the imported products. And because our borders is also seemingly porous, because of many unofficial border, official and unofficial border that smugglers are using to bring a lot of things in. If this is not done to equip or to protect the local manufacturing, we just realize we have created another opportunity for smugglers to bring in those goods that we don't want imported into this country, because the cost of production in those places is still cheaper than the cost of production within the Nigerian context. So beyond the policy pronouncement, we urge Mr. President, as he has done and will continue to do, to also take a look at what are the impediments to production. As I mentioned them earlier, regulatory issues, power issues, infrastructure issues, and those are the critical issues that can make production quite uncompetitive in this country.
All right, Mr. Bassi.
The population is growing. To be able to, produce, to take care of a population of over 230 to 250 million, estimated anywhere, is huge. And like you've mentioned, the issue of so I'm asking if this policy actually go through like we hope it will. The question is, do we have capacity locally to be able to meet demand? I mean, for a population as huge as ours in Nigeria.
Find a country that is self-sufficient in all ramifications. The principle of comparative advantage will still come into play. Those things that you realize you don't have comparative advantage of producing, then it makes economic sense for you to import those. But the ones you can produce, it doesn't make economic sense for you to import. So we cannot absolutely, in absolute terms, feed ourselves. That's the reality of it. Even if we can feed ourselves, there are certain elements within the course of that value chain of production that by nature, you are not endowed to produce. So those, you can create some leeways, you can create some exceptions. And I remember when I listened to the president, or I read the president's speech, there was a caveat that peradventure there is need for you to absolutely import, then there is a process for approval of that import. I think those are caveats that have recognized the fact that you can't basically produce everything. You can't basically have everything, because no country, as I said, is self-sufficient. But those exceptions, those exceptions must be regulated so that the discretion to import is also regulated. And that is exactly what we are saying. Now, for our population, it ordinarily should be a blessing for any business owner, even for the country, that our population is large, we should be able to feed our population. But the risk is this, if we are not careful, this blessing of population might be exploited by other African countries, because the more they can produce, the cheaper they can produce, the more attractive cheap products will be for the average Nigerians. The average Nigerian whose disposable income is also progressively coming down. So, at a point, a rational consumer will ask himself, do I go for quality or I should go for survival? And at that point, the cost of the goods, the unit of goods, will come into play. So, we don't have option. We just have to create an environment where production is cheap and where the average unit cost of producing a unit of product is also competitive in such a way that is more economically convenient to buy the Nigerian option than to go for the foreign option.
Yes, and when you talk about making it competitive so that it's easier to patronize the local option than going for foreign option, then what role is expected of private sector employers to develop the local talent? Because what we see is that people go outside for education and all of that too, and then all of this talent is then will I say based, they're exported abroad. So we and that's part of the brain drain we're talking about. So how can the private sector employers, what's their role in developing local talent to reduce dependence on foreign expertise? Because what we have is then when people now come back, then you have to pay them as expatriates and all of that, and that also is it affects it goes deep into your pocket. So how do we manage that?
Issue of talent is quite fundamental in the context of all this issue, and I really appreciate the fact that you raised it. First, let's put the searchlight where it should be first. There's a primary agency responsible for creating the environment where talent will thrive or where talent will be trained, and that is the educational system, the Ministry of Education. The fact is, what is the Ministry of Education doing with our primary and secondary school education? Because currently now, there's a conversation we had early this month that look, our curriculum, even in primary school, does it address the future needs of the business? When we are talking of AI now, we are talking of coding, we are talking of the relevant skills that will drive industrialization in the next few years. What exactly are we doing? What are we teaching our children in primary school? What are we teaching them in secondary school? The Nigerian University Commission, what is the curriculum of the university? What exactly are we teaching them? Are we preparing the university graduates for the realities of the workplace? Those are the real conversations. But for us in the private sector, and I'll share one thing we just did in NECA. In the last 1 year, we have opened 2 academies, ICT academies, one in Lagos, one in Abuja, because we realize that progressively automation, ICT will rule the workplace. We can't. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. And we all can see the impact of AI globally now. Even the higher do. AI, the conversation about AI is becoming progressive, is becoming rigorous, and is becoming consistent. So we all need to focus on building the workforce for the future. So we opened an ICT Academy in Lagos, we opened an ICT Academy in Abuja, and currently we are running free introduction to AI course for Nigerian youths. Is running concurrently in Lagos and Abuja centers. It's free of charge, just to reinforce our own commitment to say, look, we are not just employers sitting down waiting for somebody, either the Ministry of Education or the Nigerian University Commission or whatever board or whatever agency to train our youth, to train the workforce that we want. We are also actively taking part in the development of these young ones, of this talent that we are talking about. And that cuts across all or most private sector organizations, because most of them have training centers, they have their own independent academies that is helping to train the workforce that they need. And that is what the private sector has been doing, and that is what we'll continue to do. Whether those individuals, after they have been trained, whether they will go out or not, is a different ball game, because there's mobility of labor. And labor will always find the place that we pay it most. So we can't really control whether labor will move or whether they will stay within the context of this environment. On the long run, it boils down to remuneration. If I can earn $1,000 per month in Europe, why will I stay in Nigeria and earn far less? It's part of the discretion that labor has to move wherever it wants to move within the context of migration framework. So we can't control that. The best we can do is to make our own country, make it attractive in such a way that when labor or talent is exploring its options, it finds staying in Nigeria much more attractive than moving out of Nigeria.
Right. And are there any sort of incentives or support that the government is offering to private sector employers who are aligning with this Nigeria First policy in their operations?
Well, the policy was just announced about a week ago, so we are open. There'll be conversations. We'll also be sharing our own recommendation, our own views, and recommendations on how this can work and how we can work very well. We'll be sharing with government to say these are our views concerning this policy. These are our views on how we think these things can work, and it can work very well. I believe strongly that government and the relevant agency.
All right, I think we have a little bit of a technical hitch there, but we're speaking with Mr. Wale Smart Oyenride. I think we have him now.
Okay. Yeah. Is it back?
Mr. Oyenride.
Thank you.
Please go ahead, sir. You were making a point.
As I mentioned, was that we will make our own policy recommendation to government, because we know sometimes our interest differs. Sometimes government agencies, ministries or departments might be focusing on revenue generation, which also creates which changes the dynamics of their engagement with the private sector. But we'll be sharing our recommendation, our policy recommendation, our alternative policy recommendations and perspective on how this can work and how we can work for the betterment of our country and the rapid industrialization of this country. We'll be sharing it with government, and we believe strongly that those that need to listen will listen.
Okay, DG. This policy is so important that maybe we just need to deepen conversation around it as much as we can, and then touch as many areas as possible. What are key things that make people actually go for cheaper goods? You've mentioned it. If government doesn't do anything to actually bring down the unit cost of what it is that is produced in Nigeria compared to what is coming in, of course, people will always find an alternative to what is produced in Nigeria if it is higher in terms of price than what comes into the country. But I want to ask you a question on what you think government can do, because One of the things that make people go for cheaper things is that there's the high level of poverty in the country. So what will you, I mean, the disposable income is so low, and so people will always go for what is cheap. And there's some of these cheaper things are what come into the country. And so what will you recommend to the government to do to at least reduce the level of poverty in the country, to enable actually Nigerian buy what is even produced locally, which would then also impact positively on businesses, to enable them also, maybe take on more employees and then expand their capacity to produce more?
It's relative. Now, you can, during the conversation of the national minimum wage committee, there was a serious conversation we had then about the need for macroeconomic stability. Now, if the macroeconomic stability is absent, if we had agreed that minimum wage will be 1 million per month, and we didn't address the issue of inflation, we refused to address the issue of cost of funds, interest rate, we refuse to address the issue of regulatory challenges that businesses are facing, or infrastructural challenges that businesses are facing, you realize that your 1 million will not be able to buy the goods that your 30,000 was buying a few years ago. So the critical issue first, to address the issue of, and that's why poverty is relative. You can get to a season where your 30,000 is even worth more than your 1 million. Like the way we found in Zimbabwe a few years ago, where you can find 1 trillion naira Zimbabwean dollar, as a paper, and it can't even buy you a loaf of bread. So you just need to address the fundamentals, and where we are experiencing some level of stability now in the economy. I think a lot still have to be done to drag down the inflation rate, drag down the cost of production, drag down the purchasing, the unit cost of goods and services, and that we just have to do. But specifically, I think government need to support businesses more beyond the grants that government is giving. There are a lot of contradictions that government need to deal with. Now, you give an SME 20 million, and this SME found himself in band A, what the NERC call band A. Now, a substantial part of the 20 million has been chopped off, will be chopped up, paying electricity bills. And because he has to pay electricity bills, he will have to factor in that cost into the cost of production. Now, he will have to deal with regulatory issues. Of recent, we had issues, and really want to appreciate the Honorable Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment for intervention with the challenges we have, the Financial Reporting Council levy. We also want to appreciate the DG of PEBEC, want to appreciate the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms, every stakeholder that joined us to show the negative impact of all these levies and fees everywhere. Now, you pay all these levies, all these illegal and legal fees and levies. Those fees and levies will have eaten deep into the 20 million that you probably collected as a grant or as a loan. It is a loan. You have interest rate of 15, 20, 30% that you have to pay. So we need to address those fundamental macroeconomic issues that are creating bottlenecks to organize business. And this we have shared with government. And once you address those macroeconomic issues, then you have increased the capacity of the organized private sector to employ more. So once somebody is employed, it's a different thing whether the salary is enough or not. But the fact that you are employed, you have been empowered to purchase. So if you don't address the macroeconomic issues, empower the private sector, then progressively you also be fueling the issue of poverty. So empower the private sector. By the productivity in the private sector, the purchasing power of the average Nigerian and average household will continue to increase. The more they can purchase, the more businesses can produce. The more we make the environment conducive for businesses to source materials from the local market, local industry, the lesser pressure we put on the dollar, the lesser pressure you put on the dollar, the stronger the naira will become. The stronger the naira becomes, the more goods naira will be able to buy, and the more goods one naira is able to buy, the more the propensity of the business to produce more. So it's a chain reaction that if you don't deal with one path, you are frustrating or compromising the growth of the other path. So in simple economics, and for us, once production and consumption are going on progressively, concurrently, and they are feeding into themselves, then you'll have addressed the issue of poverty, you'll have addressed the issue of government revenue, you'll have addressed the issue of private sector growth, you'll have addressed the issue of job creation, and you have addressed many of issues, even bordering on issue on what do you call it now, insecurity. But the more the people are employed, the lesser idle hand you have, and the better for the economy as a whole. So our ability to create a nexus, to connect these dots, that if you promote the private sector, then you are not only promoting the business. In fact, you are kickstarting the engine that will result in the rapid growth of the economy as a whole.
All right, thank you very much, DG. I think we have to leave it here today. You have truly, given us a very insightful contribution this morning, and I'm sure Mr. Bassi also agrees with that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day.
Thank you, DG.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Well, this has been The Big Story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Keep watching BDTV.